Telecameras 3 and 4 working. Activate radio contact with the outside.
Love, wisdom, abundant life. Live a life filled with meaning, purpose, and a sense of accomplishment.
Can you hear me?
Welcome to the Teachings of Enoch. I'm your host, James Allen. You can contact me, 702-483-7769. That's 702-483-7769. Or online at teachingsofenoch.com. Let's get started with today's message. Welcome to today's show. I'm James Allen, and my guest is Ed Gilbreth, author of Birmingham Revolution. Ed, thanks for appearing on the show today, and welcome.
Thanks for having me, James. It's great to be here.
Your book that you wrote, The Birmingham Revolution, Martin Luther King Jr.'s epic challenge to the church. What sparked your interest in this particular topic, and then you decided to go ahead and pursue a book on this?
Yeah, well, I grew up in a home where Dr. King sort of hung on the wall in a portrait, and I heard stories of the civil rights movement from my parents. I should say that I was born in 1969, which was a year after Martin Luther King was assassinated. So my experience was sort of secondhand, following the history, the little bits in the school books, and, they show the clip of I Have a Dream every year. I realized over time, though, that I had sort of developed this sense of King as more of a mythical folklore hero, almost like, John Henry or Santa Claus or something like that. And over time, as I grew up, as I began to work in the evangelical world, dealing with issues of race and culture, working as a journalist, I began to see King's message in a different way and realized just how radical it was, how prophetic it was. And so I wanted to be able to sort of chart that story, both my own journey with King, but also the evangelical church's journey with King, which has not always been an easy one, and just how it's progressed and evolved over the years, and what he might say to us in terms of our situation with race and culture and politics today.
Ed, you have in your book a section in the prologue called King's Wittenberg Moment. What do you mean by that, and what was the moment where Martin Luther King kind of had his epiphany? And talk about that for us.
I try to make a connection between King and his namesake, the original Martin Luther, who back in 1517 famously pounded his 95 Theses to the door of the Wittenberg Church, and in many ways sort of launched the Reformation and this sort of movement of Christian activism. And fast forward, 400 years to Martin Luther King Jr. and his work in the American South, and how at different moments he sort of served notice that the church needs to re-examine its relationship to issues of justice, and needs to ask itself, are we on the right side of history in regards to how we treat our fellow human beings. The issues with segregation and racism in the South, the Jim Crow era of the South, is infamous. Of course, King in many ways became the most prominent reformer in terms of calling the church to examine its issues and to make a change.
There was a lot of leaders in that time period speaking out against segregation. Why do you think that Martin Luther King really became the face of that movement as opposed to some of the other people that were involved in trying to break segregation?
Yeah. Well, many reasons. I mean, one of the clear and obvious ones is that he was an incredible communicator, an incredible speaker and preacher who was able to, use language in an inspiring and eloquent way and capture people's imaginations and their attention through the use of words. But he was also someone who had a particular philosophy of nonviolence that combined, aspects of the Christian gospel with teachings that he had gleaned from Gandhi and his work for human rights in India, and just bringing together these different elements in a really inspired way. King was the son, the grandson, the great-grandson of Baptist preachers, and he grew up in a fundamentalist Baptist sort of expression of the faith, and that was always sort of ingrained in who he was and what he did. So that's one of the things I try to highlight in the book is that, there's many things said about King, and many people like to question, the validity of his faith at different times. But at the core, at the root of his beliefs was that fundamental Christian gospel and a belief that all men, women, and children were created in the image of God. That drove him, and I think that was one of the reasons why his message stood out.
You mentioned a lot of people have questioned his faith, and, over the years I've met a lot of Christian people. I've seen Christian leaders come and go, and some mighty Christian leaders fall because of some moral lapse that they've had, and I've come to the really conclusion that we're not all a saint and we're not all a sinner. Sometimes we're a mix of those, and a lot of times we battle against those, and I think sometimes we lose sight of that, and we forget that although a person is a leader and he's got a lot of strengths, that person is still a human and susceptible to all the different temptations and trials that we're all part of, and it's hard to overcome that for some people to come to grips with that.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, it doesn't take long, to open up, the Bible and find any number of men, women that God used in a powerful, profound way who had very real and clear flaws and failures. So, that's nothing new. I think sometimes, though, based on, whatever the message is, we might prefer to maybe, besmirch the name of the messenger if we are in somewhat of disagreement with what that messenger is saying. And, with King, I think at different times we've, emphasized, or some people have emphasized, issues of, his womanizing, or, he was a communist, or he was a plagiarist, or whatever. And in some way thinking that discredits what he was teaching and preaching, and that's not the case. I think the truth of his message has held up, and one of the things I try to do in my book is confront head on those issues about King in terms of his failures and his flaws, and to show that despite those things, God was working through him, and he was wrestling with his humanity in very real ways, and often, experienced depression over certain things. But that, despite that, God was present and wanted to use his voice as a vehicle for justice in our nation and in our world.
When I look back in the Old Testament, we see the character Samson, and you mentioned womanizing. Here's a person who did mighty things for God in the Old Testament, but he definitely had a problem in that area. But when you look in the New Testament, he's mentioned as one of the great leaders of faith. Mm-hmm. And I think, like you said, it's really all about the message and about our heart towards that message. We'll be back in just a few minutes, Ed. We're going to take a break. My guest today is Ed Gilbreth, author of Birmingham Revolution. I'm James Allen, and you're listening to the teachings of Enoch. We'll be back right after this.
I have a dream.
I got a dream.
One day.
We gonna work it out.
One day.
We gonna work it out.
One day.
We gonna work it out.
I have a dream.
I got a dream.
One day.
We gonna work it out.
One day.
We gonna work it out.
One day.
We gonna work
I
it out.
have a dream.
I got a dream.
That one day.
That one day.
That one day.
I'ma look deeper than myself. I gotta find a way.
I have a dream.
My dream is to be free. My dream is to be. My dream is to be. My dream is to be free.
In search of brighter days, I ride through the maze of the madness. Struggle is my address where pain and crack lives. Gunshots coming from sounds of blackness. Given this game with no time to practice. Born on the blacklist. Told I'm below average. A life with no cabbage. That's no money if you from where I'm from. Funny, I just want some of your son. Dark clouds seem to follow me. Alcohol that my pop swallowed bottle me. No apology, I walk with a boulder on my shoulder. It's a cold war, I'm a colder soldier. Hold the same fight that made Martin Luther the king. I ain't using it for the right thing. In between lean and the fiends, hustle and the schemes, I put together pieces of a dream. I still have one.
I got a dream.
One day.
We gonna work it out.
One day.
We gonna work it out.
One day.
We gonna work it out.
I have a dream.
I got a dream.
One day.
We gonna work it out.
One day.
We gonna work it out.
One day.
We gonna work
I
it out.
have a dream.
I got a dream.
That one day.
That one day.
That one day.
I'ma look deeper than myself. I gotta find a way.
I have a dream.
My dream is to be free. My dream is to be. My dream is to be. My dream is to be free.
The world see me looking in the mirror. Images of me getting much clearer. Dear self, I wrote a letter just to better my soul. If I don't express it, then forever I hold inside. I'm from a side where we out of control. Rap music and the hood play the fatherly role. My story like yours, yo, gotta be told. Trying to make it from a gangster to a Galia role. Red scrolls of stone slaves and Jewish people in cold cage. Hate has no color or age. Flip the page. Now my race became freedom. Right dreams in the dark, they far, but I can see them. I believe in heaven more than hell. Blessings more than jail. In the ghetto, let love prevail. With a story to tell. My eyes see the glory and well, the world waiting for me to yell. I have a dream.
I got a dream.
One day.
We gonna work it out.
One day.
We gonna work it out.
One day.
We gonna work it
I
out.
have a dream.
I got a dream.
One day.
We gonna work it out.
One day.
We gonna work it out.
One day.
We gonna work
I
it out.
have a dream.
I got a dream.
That one day.
That one day.
That one day.
I'ma look deeper than myself. I gotta find a way.
I have a dream.
My dream is to be free. My dream is to be. My dream is to be. My dream is to be free.
Welcome back to the show. I'm James Allen, and my guest today is Ed Gilbreth. He's author of Birmingham Revolution, and it's Martin Luther King Jr.'s epic challenge to the church. He went to jail in Birmingham. He wrote the famous letter, the letter from the Birmingham jail. What in your research did you find that really surprised you about this letter and how it came into and how he penned this letter?
Yeah, well, I have to admit up front, I came to believe over the years that I Have a Dream was that was it. That was the voice of Martin Luther King, and that was the most important thing that he had ever given us. But as I spent more time with Letter from Birmingham Jail, I became convinced that this is perhaps his most significant and profound statement of the intersection of faith and justice, and the call to the church that it needed to be agents of change in our world, and he lays it all out. a little background. King arrived in Birmingham in April 1963, and marched in opposition to an injunction that there wouldn't be any public parading. He was immediately arrested and thrown into solitary confinement on Good Friday, 1963. In jail, he was given a copy of the local newspaper where he read an op-ed piece by a group of white clergymen from Birmingham who were critical of King's presence there. And these clergymen were made up of Protestants and Catholics and a rabbi, a Jewish rabbi. And they were saying, hey, King is a disruption. He should not be coming from Atlanta into our city causing problems. The interesting thing, and one of the things that sometimes gets overlooked, is that these 8 clergymen were actually supporters of civil rights. In fact, they had spoken out earlier in the year against Governor George Wallace and his infamous, segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever rant during his inauguration. And so they had a reputation for being outspoken against the segregation in their city. Yet in this case, they believed it was wise for the black community to wait for the laws to unfold, and that King's presence in the city would just cause problems and violence and these things. King was outraged when he read this. He had been receiving criticism from, President Kennedy. He had been receiving criticism from the New York Times and Time Magazine and all these other places. He didn't expect that these brethren, these fellow ministers would, get on his case as well. He started writing in the margins of the newspaper to respond. He ran out of paper there and started picking up whatever scraps he could find. It said that he grabbed some toilet paper from the cell and was writing on that and furiously jotting down his statement of why it was important for the black community to not wait, why they had to respond now. Why he would write, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, and why it was important for him to not sit idly by in Atlanta when these things were happening in Birmingham. He needed to be there, and he would share from the great philosophers, Socrates. He would share from St. Augustine and St. Thomas Aquinas, Thomas Jefferson, Frederick Douglass. I mean, he had this photographic memory of just bringing out all these different things to create this tapestry of history of our world, of Western civilization, and combining that with an interpretation of the Christian gospel that showed us why it was so important for the church to take a stand for justice. And it was a powerful statement, and I encourage anyone, everyone really, to reread it if you haven't read it, to read it, to just get a sense of King's thinking and how all of his ideas sort of coalesced in this cogent and powerful statement.
Now, at what point did Martin Luther King, did things change for him in terms of support from the president, from ministers? Obviously, things had to change because he needed really their support. How did that support start to turn more in his favor?
Yeah, well, I think Birmingham again is the flashpoint for this. As you, the movement at one point was sort of dying out. There wasn't enough support. There weren't enough marchers coming out. The idea came from one of Dr. King's deputies, James Bevel, that we needed to get children, to get high schoolers and grade schoolers out to march. Many of the adults could not march because they were either working and they would lose their jobs if they didn't show up, or they risked being thrown in jail and not able to take care of their families. So a lot of the youth began to realize, hey, we're the only ones that could truly do something here. They were called out from different high schools and different schools, and they marched. And this is where you get that, those historic images of young people being attacked by the police dogs, the German Shepherds, and you get the pictures of these teens and youth, being knocked over by the fire hoses. And these images began to go up around the nation, in our newspapers, on television, around the world, really. And suddenly, the great ugliness, the great shame of Jim Crow segregation and racism was exposed for all to see. And it began to prick at the conscience of the nation. And President Kennedy saw this as well and realized something needed to change and began to push more for civil rights legislation. He would not live to see it passed, but his successor, Lyndon Johnson, would pick it up and famously push it through. So you got the Civil Rights Act of 1964, you would get the Voting Rights Act of 65, and the laws began to change, and people began to see the reality of what was happening in the South, and King became the spokesperson for that. It was not always an easy situation. You know, I hesitate to say that, you know, everybody turned in his favor. He was still hated and dismissed by many, but it was undeniable what was happening in the South, and King was able to highlight that for a nation.
You know, it's incredible in some ways that President Johnson kind of took up this issue and pushed it. Here's a guy that grew up in Texas. I mean, he's definitely a good old boy. But he went to Congress. He put his name on the line. What were some of the things in your research that maybe influenced him to make a stand on this issue?
Yeah, President Johnson was a very interesting figure. Like you said, I don't think anyone else could have successfully gotten that legislation through, because he was a child of the South. He sort of understood how things worked and was able to, you know, sort of speak the language of those Dixiecrats, you know, those Southern Democrats at the time who he needed to win over. And you know, a lot of folks have said, you know, in the back rooms, he would still use the N-word and everything. Yet he knew that you know, the progress of our nation depended on us overcoming our racism, and that it would be a great hindrance to moving forward. He also was someone who I think had having experienced some poverty in his own upbringing, and then working as a school teacher early in his career, working with you know, Mexican students, he had a genuine heart to help those in need. So there was that. Yet at the same time, you know, it's undeniable that you know, a lot of the things he said and did were tainted with racism. So he was this contradiction of sorts, yet he was the right man for the time. And you know, he and King had a sort of an uneasy alliance. It sort of disintegrated a little later when King began to take more of a public opposition to the Vietnam War, which became, you know, Johnson's big thorn in the side. But it's undeniable that you know, for that moment, King and Johnson together were you know, the great agents for change in terms of changing our laws in the nation and bringing civil rights to the forefront.
How has the relationship of Martin Luther King Jr. changed among the years? Of course, he's gone now, but just his philosophy and everything he represent changed among evangelicals, and really, where in your mind does this put us today?
Yeah, I mean, so many people that I spoke to, many you know, white Christians, those who, you know, lived during that time, and others who, you know, grew up in families where their parents, you know, talked about King. You know, a lot of the stories were of, you know, dislike of King, and how bad he was, and, you know, how he wasn't a Christian, and all of these things, and how over the years that sort of became the story for many evangelicals, that King wasn't a real Christian. Yeah, he gave some good speeches, and he you know, did some good things, but, you know, a Christian? But I think over time we began as a movement in some ways to see the reality, the importance of the justice component in our faith, and we've developed a sense that a holistic expression of the gospel includes a commitment to justice, and that in itself is at the heart of what it means to truly love our neighbor. And the church is still wrestling with those things. There's lots of debates going on, but I think over time we've come to recognize that, King had his flaws, but he was speaking prophetically. He was really ahead of his time in terms of the church's responsibility and the role of the church in, providing transformation for this world.
My guest, Ed Gilbreth. He's author of Birmingham Revolution.
What's going on? What are they stopping for?
Love, wisdom, abundant life. That's my hope for you. You've been listening to the Teachings of Enoch. I'm James Allen, your host. You can contact me 702-483-7769. That's 702-483-7769. Or online at teachingsofenoch.com.